This is Business Insights. I'm David Matthews. Live Happy Now, a new podcast from Live Happy magazine, has been featured on the New and Noteworthy page and ranked #1 in the Health and Science and Medicine New and Noteworthy categories within the first week on iTunes. The weekly audio series offers listeners scientifically proven tips and ideas to live a happier and more meaningful life through interviews with positive psychology and well-being thought leaders. Deborah Heisz, Live Happy's co-founder, COO, and editorial director, joins us now. Deborah, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, Deborah, what is Live Happy, and can you tell me more about the happiness movement?
Certainly. Live Happy was founded 2 years ago, this coming up October, to bring all of this fantastic information about how you could live a happier life out of academic and scientific circles where they've been researching it for 20 years and bring it to consumers. Because there's a tremendous amount of scientifically proven information and scientifically based activities that you personally can do to choose to live a happier life today, and it just wasn't reaching consumers. And so we saw an opportunity and we launched Live Happy, and it's been growing and we got great reception and we're just having a great time with it.
Oh, that's great. Well, now you launched the Live Happy Now podcast on iTunes. Can you tell me more about it and how it's going?
Certainly. First of all, in your introduction, you mentioned that we were featured on New and Notable. We've actually hit #1 on New and Notable several times over the last 5 weeks, and we've had about 70,000 downloads in that time frame, which
awesome.
Is pretty fast. Yeah, we're having a great response on it. We realize we publish a magazine. We also have a digital magazine. We have a website, all geared towards people reading content. But we're a really mobile society, and by launching the podcast, we felt like we could get the same exciting content to people who might not have time to sit down and read, or who might not spend a lot of time, engaging in written content, and still get the same information to these people. And a podcast was a great way to do it. And we launched the podcast. We're having, putting out two copies a week and having a good time with that, and had a great response.
Well, that's great. Now, so what kind of topics can listeners expect to hear about, and what kind of guest, or who will the guest be?
Well, we've already had people like Tom Rath and Michelle McQuaid. Tom Rath really talks about his "Are You Fully Charged" concept, which is from his book. And then, Michelle Gielan, who has a bestseller right now called Broadcasting Happiness. And then Sean Aker is upcoming. He's got the Happiness Advantage. So there's a lot of scientific sources and a lot of research-based sources. I recently did an interview with Caroline Miller, and her specialty is on goal setting and how to incorporate goal setting. But she's also got a big project going on grit and building resilience in students. So it's a variety of topics from scientists and researchers, but we also feature and will be featuring people who are on their own personal happiness journeys. For example, we just had Tori Johnson on, who made a real shift in her life, and so we were interviewing her about how she came about that shift and what steps she took and what she had for our listeners, what advice she had for our listeners who wanted to make a big change. We've got a feature coming up on anti-bullying. We had a feature article in the magazine on the end of bullying and its tactics that can be taken to really cure bullying in school environments. And so it's a great feature, and we've got almost everyone who was interviewed for the magazine article on the podcast to kind of have a discussion about how we can combat bullying in October, which is National Month of Bullying. So we're launching that on October 3rd. So a variety of topics, but all around enhancing life and about how you can live a happier life. And
so that's something that we can all actually get a little control over, is how we live our life to be happier people. Is that kind of the essence of that?
Yeah, most people don't realize that happiness is population-wise 50% genetic. So some of us are geared to be happier than others. 10% environmental, the environment we're in. Now you have to exclude war-torn environments when you're talking about the 10%, but really for most of us, certainly those of us who live here, 10% environmental, and the other 40% is choices we make. This is a study that was published that says that 40% of how happy we are is based on decisions that we personally make. We can choose to be happier. Bad things happen to everybody. It's how you react to them that really sets how happy you are.
Yeah. So what kind of feedback have you been receiving for the podcast so far?
Well, tremendous feedback. We've had over 300, I think at this point, 340 reviews, which is a lot on iTunes. Mm-hmm. And but overwhelmingly 5 stars. We've only had 1 or 2 that are 4-star reviews. We've had people who have said, I've always wanted to read your magazine, but I didn't have time. One of the best reviews we've gotten is from someone who is a dear friend of mine, but she said, you know what, your podcast is the right length because it's the length of my commute, which is important in that environment. It's 25 minutes. She can log on, she can listen to it, and the average commute in the United States is 27 minutes. So we try and keep under that 25-minute mark so that people can listen to it while they're driving to and from work.
And then end up being happier when they get to work.
That's right.
Yeah. So how can listeners access the podcast?
We're on iTunes or we're on Stitcher as a Google app. You can also go to our website, Live Happy Now. LiveHappy.com is the parent website, but if you just type in LiveHappyNow.com, you can find our podcast. We've got lots of extras from all of our guests too. We have, various quizzes, excerpts of chapters of their books, notes from the podcast themselves. So I encourage people to go to the website and check out not only the podcast, but what other extras are available from our guests.
Well, Deborah, I'm very happy that you could be with us here today. Thank you so very much for that. Thanks for the insight about this exciting podcast that you've got going on. And we really appreciate you spending the time for being here with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
This is Business Insights. I'm David Matthews. Thanks for watching.